With the growing tension with Iran, getting clear reporting out of that country is as important as ever, perhaps more so. To do that, the BBC's domestic service cut an unusual deal. Iranian authorities would let their correspondent into the country as long as his reporting wasn't shared with the BBC's Persian-language service.
Everyone in Iran has been affected by the American sanctions.
In recent days, the BBC's UK audience has gotten a window into Iran, thanks to the reporting of correspondent Martin Patience.
Sanctions have caused the price of meat and vegetables to more than double.
But reporting in Iran comes with unique challenges and major restrictions, something the BBC acknowledged.
While in the country, filming access was controlled, as with all foreign media.
Left unsaid is that the BBC also cut a deal. According to an internal email obtained by HuffPo, the BBC agreed to restrict all of Patience's reporting from appearing on the system's Persian-language TV or radio service, which Tehran considers hostile. Still, the BBC may have been lucky to get any access at all.
I am one of the last foreign journalists still allowed to work here.
That's New York Times reporter Thomas Erdbrink, who spoke to Frontline about the daily challenges of covering Iran, including government minders shadowing his every move.
He has to give us permission for whatever we want to film in Iran.
Last month, the Times disclosed that Erdbrink had his press credentials yanked. And then there's Washington Post reporter Jason Rezaian, who was detained in Tehran on flimsy charges for over a year.
Why do you think they chose you?
They chose me because I was the best available option. I was an American citizen working for a major American media organization.
Rezaian's story alone is enough to make news organizations ask, what are we willing to do to get the story? Another quick disclosure, WGBH co-produces the radio program The World with the BBC World Service. One thing that struck me in the Huffington Post piece that broke this story was that the BBC Persian employees, who've had a really hard time with the Iranian government, they've had their assets frozen, they've been accused of conspiracy to take down the government, they were livid about this. They saw this as compounding the abuse they received from Iran, as opposed to something that might make Iran ease up, which is noteworthy.
Right. I think, it was pointed out in the piece there that there are deals that are done in various different countries by news organizations. When I went to Cuba, I remember I had to agree that I would go and check in with a minder there who was supposed to follow me around, and I don't know what kind of control. It ended up that they weren't there, and so I went ahead and did my work. But the thinking is that they're going to listen to what you're saying and perhaps even jump in at some point. But this is a little different, right? I think this goes beyond some of the deals that at least we find out about, that news organizations will often cut with different governments in order to get access. This one seems like it goes a little further. So having said all of that, I do believe that there are times where you need to go beyond the ordinary in order to get at the story. And if it requires you having to have a minder with you or to cut some sort of a deal where only part of your audience will have access to the information, and you believe that the story that you're going to get is so important and there's no other way to get the story, then I think you have to go with it. And I don't have a problem with it, as long as you fully disclose all aspects of that deal to your audience.
That's where I have trouble with this, too. In saying that they were restricted as to where they could film, they could also say, and our Persian audiences are not allowed to see this reporting. And that gives it a whole new meaning. It brings a lot of resonance. I think you have to focus on the greater good. Is it more important that the greater BBC audience be able to see this, and it's shielded from the people in the country in which they are reporting? Maybe it is. It depends on what they're going to do. Talking about sanctions, the people who live there are aware that there are sanctions. Talking about the price of food and gas, the people who live there, they know things are bad. So they're not, from what we've seen in the clip, they're not missing out on that much. But the rest of the world could be missing out on a lot if they think everything's hunky-dory there.
Well, we're probably going to all come down on the same side here. The deal itself, I'm squishy about it. I don't like it. But it was unconscionable for them not to disclose to their audience that this deal had been cut.
I think in other places where there are limitations, particularly I'm thinking about television, they say, well, here we are in South Korea, where they say they're dismantling something. Here we are. We couldn't go 2 blocks without their following. It's very, very, very clear. Mm-hmm. So you have to say that they're preventing us. Let me answer your question. Well, how do you get maybe this is the only way to get something that the people in the country already know some things. Well, what they don't know, and what is important, is what is the rest of the world thinking.
Right.
And if you're limited by them putting a structure around what you can say, then the rest of the world doesn't really know now, does it? So that's two things happening there. And I think it's important that if you're going to do something like that, which is a little squishy to begin with, like you say, squishy is worse than squishy, then you have to say every step of the way. And I'm now accustomed to those reporters being so upfront about it, so it's really clear that I'm being followed, somebody check my stuff, I don't know what they said, I can only give you 20 seconds, whatever. And that should be absolutely something that the audience understands.
I do wonder if they were thinking about their own audience, though. What would a British audience care that something couldn't be broadcast
That's not my
in Persia?
problem.
I wonder if that was part of it.
And you don't even have to be specific. You could just say, there were restrictions on what we could do in country and who could see the content once we came out. Even that you could get away without being specific to the audience.
Yeah, but that's not as powerful as what.
No, I agree. That would be the much
that
more
really
more
gives you
powerful
other
way.
editorial content too about what's going on.